My name is Dr. Rachel Monroe. I'm a geriatric physician based in Asheville, North Carolina. And this past Christmas, my family told me not to come home. The call came 3 days before the holiday. I had just finished a 16-hour shift at the hospital. Tired, but still cheerful. I glanced at the packed bag near my door. Gifts for everyone, even Rosemary. They always asked about the stuffing, even though they never remembered I was the one who made it. I'd even bought a new sweater. Forest green, soft, simple, festive, without trying too hard. Then my phone buzzed. My brother Nate. I figured he was calling to ask if I could bring extra napkins or confirm we were carpooling like we did every year. Instead, he said, "Hey, listen, so Chloe's coming to Christmas, right? And she's really sensitive to energy. Like, how your job kind of brings a heaviness into the room sometimes." He cleared his throat. "For her sake, maybe you could sit this one out. It's nothing personal." He didn't say, "You help people die with dignity." He didn't say, "You're a compassionate physician who works with the elderly, the forgotten." Just that I was heavy, like a wet towel on his perfect little aesthetic. An hour later, my mom called. Her voice was soft, like a lullaby hiding a grenade. "Honey, we're just trying to keep things simple. You know how sensitive Chloe is. If you come, it might stir things up. Honestly, we might not answer the door." That was the moment I knew. I wasn't just not invited. I was unwanted. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just said, "Okay." Then I opened my bank app, paused my monthly transfers, canceled the $800 I'd been covering toward their mortgage, suspended the car loan payments I made for Nate last fall. I stopped being their silent safety net. No post, no announcement, just silence. And for the first time, that silence was mine. I used to think how they treated me was normal. Maybe I was just too serious, too intense, too much. Growing up, I was the oldest. Dad called me the test run at cookouts, right before giving Nate the bigger slice of cake. Nate the golden boy. Artistic, charming, the miracle baby after years of trying. I was just the one who came first. When Nate was 6, he drew all over the living room wall in permanent marker. They called it expressive. When I broke a bowl while helping set the table, I was careless, told I needed to be more mindful. Nate came home with a participation ribbon once. It stayed on the fridge for a week. I brought home straight A's. They said, "That's great," then slid the report card into a drawer. When I got into med school on the first try, no gap year, no second round, I printed out my acceptance letter, showed my mom. She said, "Wow, that's intense. Just be careful you don't burn out." When Nate dropped out of college for the 3rd time to pursue creative exploration, they threw him a re-entry party. Balloons, cake, a photo of him holding a paintbrush. Framed. He walked down that hallway like he'd cured cancer. They always said he was sensitive and felt things deeply. Once, I found my old sketchbook in the recycling bin. Underneath grocery ads, I asked about it. They said they thought it was scrap paper, but I kept going. I graduated early, got licensed, started working with seniors, people discarded by society, left to deteriorate alone. I gave them my time, my energy, my entire heart. At home, I gave too, quietly paying off their plumbing repairs, covering that overdue roof bill they forgot to mention. I lent Nate money when his freelance gig fell through, never asked for it back, never brought it up again, but none of that mattered. Not in a family where Nate was the center of gravity, and I, despite everything, was just the one who, but never made things light. I stopped complaining, but it didn't stop hurting. There's a certain kind of ache in being the person everyone relies on but no one really sees. That was me. The fixer. The helper. The one who paid for their water heater when it broke in February. The one who noticed the overdraft and moved money before anyone saw. The one who booked Nate's flight home for Thanksgiving last year because he said his card got declined after buying new camera gear. I never said no. Not once. Not when mom needed co-pays for physical therapy. Not when Nate called stranded on the side of the road with a dead battery. I had one delivered the next day. I thought being useful meant I was loved. But then I saw the pattern. How my presence was only felt when it vanished. How my help was invisible until it stopped. I was always too much when I was there. Too serious. Too intense. But when I wasn't, everything felt lighter, easier, and still. I kept giving. I told myself it was love. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe just routine. But that night when they told me not to come home for Christmas, something broke. And it wasn't sadness. It was clarity. I didn't yell. I didn't text back. I didn't even tell my friends. I just sat down, opened my bank app again, and I turned it all off. Every automatic payment, every quiet safety net, the $800 monthly mortgage supplement gone. The rainy day savings I'd kept in case the house needed a new furnace locked. The $1,000 Nate still owed me forgotten. I knew it wouldn't come back. But I also knew I wouldn't be sending a single dime more. They wouldn't notice at first. That's the thing about being silently useful. You only become visible when you stop. And I didn't say a word. No vague post, no cryptic quote, no late night call. I just let the quiet settle. And for the first time in my life, it felt like peace. Christmas came and went. I spent it alone. Just me, a mug of tea, a blanket that smelled faintly of rosemary fabric softener. I didn't light the tree, didn't open the gifts I'd wrapped, didn't cry. I just sat still. There was a power in not showing up, in not allowing myself to be the background character in a holiday I was never truly part of. Then, the day after Christmas, my phone buzzed. Not once, 3 times, a missed call from my mom, then a text. Can you please respond? You've already done enough damage. My stomach dropped. A second call. This one from Aunt Diane, the only person in the family who still mailed handwritten birthday cards. I answered. What happened yesterday? She asked softly. They're saying you ruined Christmas, but you weren't even there. I blinked. I ruined it, she paused. Something happened with Chloe, she whispered. Nate's girlfriend. She left early. There was yelling. Then your name came up. That was all she knew, but it was enough. Later that night, Aunt Diane called again. She'd pieced together more. Apparently, Chloe had seen a photo of me in the hallway, just a simple frame, probably from years ago. She recognized the name, the face. Your Dr. Rachel Monroe, she'd said. You saved my grandmother. Aunt Diane said the room went silent. And what came next? No one told her clearly. Just that Chloe had asked more questions, and what she heard made her quietly pack her things and leave. I didn't need the details. I could picture it. The forced laughs, the flippant jokes, the dismissive tone they always used when my name came up. Maybe they said I was intense, too serious, too much. Maybe Nate dropped that same cruel line he once said behind my back, Rachel's basically death in a pantsuit. He thought it was clever, but Chloe heard it differently because she remembered something else. She remembered the doctor who sat by her grandmother's bedside. When every other physician had walked away, she remembered someone who stayed, who didn't flinch, who didn't give up. She remembered kindness, compassion, presence. She saw me. Without anyone needing to explain, that's how I ruined Christmas. By not being there, by not holding up the illusion, by being remembered by someone outside their narrative for the good I had done. 2 days later, another call. My mom. She didn't say hello. She just started talking. I don't know what you said to her, but now your brother's a mess. Chloe blocked him. She won't speak to him. And she posted something online about being treated poorly by the family of a woman she admires. There was a clink of glass in the background. Maybe pacing in the kitchen. Maybe pouring herself a crisis glass of wine. Probably both. She tagged your photo. She snapped. Like I'd committed some public crime. I didn't reply. I let her talk. Eventually, she got to the point. We need you to talk to her. Clarify that she misunderstood, that it wasn't meant to be personal. Right. I was the family's damage control. The PR rep for people who'd uninvited me from their dinner table. She's ruining your brother's reputation, my mom added, her voice softening. She runs in those New York art circles. He's being blacklisted. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. They spent decades trying to make me invisible, and now the consequences of that invisibility were finally landing somewhere they cared about. Their image. I'll think about it, I said. I didn't think about it. Instead, I opened Chloe's post. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't angry. It was honest. She wrote about the doctor who saved her grandmother, about walking into a house full of smiles and subtle cruelty, about the shock of realizing that the woman who'd shown her real kindness was being mocked by her own family. One sentence stood out. Some people hide cruelty behind polite smiles and holiday lights, but when I saw her photo, I remembered what real kindness looks like. And it wasn't anyone sitting at that table. It went viral in her circles. For the first time in my life, people saw me, not as heavy, not as difficult, not as too much, but as someone who mattered. That night, just before bed, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't my mom, it wasn't Nate, it wasn't my dad who only ever calls when he needs help resetting his email password. It was Chloe, a voicemail. Her voice was quieter than I remembered from that one video Nate had sent. Less floaty, less curated, more real. Hi, she began. I'm sorry to reach out like this. I got your number from your aunt. I hope that's okay. There was a pause. I needed to say something. Another pause. Longer this time. I didn't know who you were, she said, her voice cracking a little. But I recognized your photo. From years ago. You treated my grandmother. She still talks about you. She says you changed everything. You didn't give up on her when others did. You were kind. You were present. You made her feel like she mattered. There was another silence. I'm sorry for what happened. For what was said. I had no idea. I couldn't sit there pretending everything was fine. So I left. That was it. I listened to it once, then again, then a third time. And I cried. Not because I was sad, but because someone saw me. Really saw me. Not through family obligation, not through a filtered lens of too serious, too cold, too strange, not as a burden, not as background to Nate's glow, just me. Chloe didn't ask for anything. She didn't say we should grab coffee. She didn't try to patch what she hadn't broken. She simply acknowledged the truth. And that did more to heal me than 1,000 half-hearted apologies ever could. 3 days later, a package arrived in the mail. No return address. Inside, a handwritten letter on thick paper. Ink smudged a little at the corners. She wrote about her grandmother. How she still practices yoga twice a week. How she walks to the farmer's market and tells everyone the story of the young doctor who once looked her in the eye and said, "You're not done yet." Chloe thanked me, not just for saving a life, but for showing her what real strength looked like. I framed that letter, hung it next to my desk, the same desk where I finished patient notes every night. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to prove anything. Not to them, not to anyone. I thought the dust had finally settled. Then my inbox lit up. Subject line, "Let's do a reset." An email from all three of them. Mom, Dad, Nate, a unified front, like they were submitting a group project. The tone. Exactly what I expected. People who think apologies are negotiations. They didn't say sorry, not once. Instead, they wrote about how emotions had run high, how things might have been perceived. Translation, we still think we were right, but now we're afraid of the consequences. They suggested brunch, neutral territory, open-hearted conversation, and then buried in paragraph 4, the real ask. They wanted me to talk to Chloe, to kindly ask if she'd take her post down. There it was. The olive branch wasn't about reconciliation. It was about reputation. About Nate standing in the art world. About mopping up their mess. With me as the mop, I didn't respond. The next morning, the escalation began. My dad called one of the hospital administrators I work with. A man he met once, 3 years ago, at a charity gala, said he was concerned about my emotional stability, said I'd been acting erratic, tried to paint me as unstable at my own job. Gaslighting, manipulation, damage control. Luckily, my administrator called me directly, apologized, said he didn't believe a word of it. That bridge burned. Next came the group text. Family-wide, carefully worded half-truths, no mention that I was excluded, no mention of the comments, just she's crying a lot. We're so worried about her mental state. 2 cousins I hadn't heard from in years reached out. One offered a yoga retreat voucher, just in case you're struggling. I stared at my phone, stunned. Then came the final move, the most desperate one, a knock on my door. Quiet Sunday afternoon. I looked through the peephole. There they were, Mom, Dad, Nate, standing together, like a movie scene, like they were heroes returning to save me. I opened the door, leaned against the frame, arms crossed. We just want to talk, my mom said gently. I didn't move, because by then, I finally understood. They weren't here for me. They were here for the version of me who always made things easy, the one who cleaned up their messes, absorbed their mistakes, smiled through the pain. That version no longer exists. They stood there, waiting, hoping I'd fold, that I'd invite them in, that I'd fix it again. But I didn't. I just said, no. No explanations, no tears, no fury, just no. And I shut the door. Then I made myself a cup of tea, sat at my desk, and looked at the letter from Chloe, framed in soft wood, hung with care. A reminder that sometimes, the people who see you most clearly aren't the ones who share your blood. They're the ones who paid attention. I sat in the quiet, let the tea cool in my hands, and thought about all the years I spent trying to earn their love, trying to prove I was enough, trying to balance their indifference with achievement. They had always measured me against a version of myself that made them comfortable, the fixer, the stable one, the quiet success story who knew when to disappear. While Nate got center stage, while they called his chaos passion, while they called my steadiness too much. But I wasn't born to make them feel at ease. I was born to heal, to hold hands with people as they faced goodbye, to be there when no one else was, to remind strangers they mattered even at the very end. I made a difference, a real one. Not with grand gestures, not with photo ops or speeches, but with presence. I didn't save lives for praise. I didn't pay their bills for gratitude. And I didn't walk away to make a point. I walked away because I finally saw the truth. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. There is strength in refusing to explain yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. There is power in setting boundaries, in saying no, and meaning it, and no. I didn't feel guilty, not for closing the door, not for staying silent, not for keeping my peace. The days passed quietly. I went back to work, treated my patients, laughed with nurses at lunch, held wrinkled hands through hard goodbyes, wrote notes late into the evening. Every now and then, I'd glance up at the letter on the wall, the one Chloe sent, the one that didn't try to fix me, just recognized me. And in those moments, I felt something unfamiliar. Freedom. One afternoon, I received another envelope, this time from Chloe's grandmother. It was short, a thank you card, just a few lines in delicate cursive. You stayed when no one else would. You reminded me I was still here. You gave me back my breath when I thought it was my last. Thank you for seeing me. I placed that card next to the letter, 2 pieces of paper, but they held more love than I ever got from the people I used to chase. I no longer needed their praise, their apologies, their approval, because I had something they could never give me: self-trust. A deep grounded understanding that I am good, that I am whole, that I am enough, even if they never say so, especially if they never do, and that realization, it was worth every lonely Christmas, every closed door, every silence I once feared. Now, silence feels like a choice, not a punishment, not a weapon, just space, room to breathe, room to exist, room to heal. That winter, I walked more, through the city, past old bookstores, into tiny cafes with mismatched chairs. People started recognizing me. You're the doctor from that story, right? The one Chloe wrote about. They'd nod, smile, say thank you. One young woman told me she applied to nursing school after reading it, said she finally felt seen, too. And just like that, the truth I had lived quietly for years began to ripple, not because I shouted, but because someone else finally spoke it out loud. Not for me, but with me. We are not broken because we choose boundaries. We are not cruel for stepping back. We are not wrong for refusing to be invisible. Sometimes, the most radical act of love is walking away from those who only love the version of you that served them, and never saw the version that saved everyone else. Spring came slowly to Asheville. The trees outside my window bloomed a little later this year, but they bloomed just the same. One morning, I made my usual cup of tea, sat down at my desk, and opened my laptop. No chaos, no calls, no demands to fix what I didn't break, just calm, just breath. I reviewed patient charts, signed off on a hospice transfer, and smiled softly when I saw the name, someone's grandmother, someone's story, someone I would treat with the same care I always had. That afternoon, I walked to the community garden, pulled weeds, watered the rosemary bush I'd planted in December, still thriving, still mine. I ran into Chloe a few days later. She was visiting for a gallery event nearby. She didn't text first, didn't plan it. We just crossed paths. A quiet moment. She stopped, smiled. "I didn't think I'd see you," she said. I smiled back. I didn't think anyone would notice. We stood there a while, talked about her grandmother, about how she was painting again, how the arthritis was still there but the spirit was louder. Then Chloe handed me a print, one of her newest pieces. Simple lines, muted colors, a woman seated at a window, calm, not waiting, not reaching, just centered. She titled it Still. I hung it next to the letter and the thank you card. And every night since, I've looked at that wall as I finish my notes, and I remember I don't need a full house on Christmas to feel loved. I don't need a title to feel proud. I don't need their table. If I have my own seat, and to anyone listening, to anyone who has ever been told you're too much, too serious, too quiet, too inconvenient, let me tell you what no one told me. You are not too much. You are not the problem. And you have never, ever needed to shrink just to fit someone else's comfort. You don't need to be loud to be powerful. You don't need to be seen by everyone to matter deeply. Write your own story. Live your own peace. Walk away, not to hurt them, but to finally be with yourself. If this story found its way to you, if you've ever sat alone on a holiday and wondered why love had to feel so conditional, take a breath. You're not alone. You were just never meant to stay where you weren't seen. So walk, and when you're ready, speak. Because sometimes the quietest stories hold the loudest truths, and sometimes not showing up is the most powerful thing you can do. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do in life is simply walk away from the places, people, and roles where you were only valued for what you gave, not for who you are. This story reminds us that being dependable does not mean being disposable. For those who have spent decades holding families together, staying quiet to keep the peace, or giving without ever being acknowledged, the lesson is clear. Your worth is not tied to how much you endure. As we grow older, we gain the right to set boundaries, to choose peace over pleasing, and to let go of relationships that only see us as useful, not as whole. Recognition does not always come from the people we love, but it can come, beautifully and unexpectedly, from those we helped along the way. Let that be enough. Let kindness speak louder than silence. And remember, it's never too late to reclaim your story. You do not need a crowd to prove you mattered. Sometimes, all it takes is one honest voice, one heartfelt thank you, to remind you that you were seen and that you still are.